Welcome to another episode of Science Den, and today we are here with ornithologist Yen, Dr. Tan Yen. We'll be talking about shorebirds, actually, which is also your research topic.
Or my thesis. My dissertation, I did a lot of work on shorebirds. And shorebirds are those little birds that you see if you go to Sungai Buloh or any mudflats in Singapore. These birds are also pod waders. They are pod waders because they wade in the water. That's why they all have long legs. And they often run along the mudflats and probe their bills in the mud for food. For my work, I did a lot of population genetics because I'm a evolutionary geneticist by practice. So my PhD chapters all comprise genetic work. My first chapter started out small scale. We focused on redshanks in Singapore, and we tried to identify whether or not these redshanks differ in genetic diversity throughout the years. My second chapter is on like a population-wide, a species-wide, distribution-wide study. So that was a pretty much bigger scale study because we had to collect all these samples from all the relevant populations of interest. So that one, we had 233 individuals, in addition to maybe about 100 from Singapore. And what they found was a very interesting genomic climb. So instead of having pockets of differentiation, you actually have like a bit of a gradient by longitude. So from east to west, it goes very gradually instead of having fractures.
Hey, you're talking about like the deviation in the Tudor. Okay.
How different they are from each other relative to their genetic makeup. Yeah.
Okay.
So redshanks are, as their name suggests, they have red legs. The redshanks are they were kind of surprising because we know that the redshank is polytypic. That means there are many subspecies, and subspecies are usually designated based on morphological differences or some other vocal differences. For shorebirds, they don't really vocalize a great deal. They are kind of consistent and very standard kind of call, just a beep 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 kind of call, but it doesn't really, there's no song, not very little.
Yeah.
So bioacoustics wise, very little data you can like try to analyze within the species. We would expect that birds that come from a region where subspecies is known to be endemic would be somewhat genetically different, because if they look different, they should be somewhat different, right? In genetics, it should be reflected in their genome.
Yes.
But what I found was not the case. That because there are 6 subspecies, but I didn't find 6 clusters. Okay, that means the genetic basis for subspecies is not very strong. It's actually very weak.
Right.
Yeah, and even in the field, we know that redshanks, the subspecies of redshanks are very similar.
Yeah.
So what we found in the redshanks is that the morpho data already suggests that it's quite weak, weakly differentiated between the subspecies, and now we also have genetic data showing that they are kind of the same throughout the entire breeding range of the Quelea.
Yeah.
With the global data set, we were able to identify that Singapore's redshanks all come from the same population in Simpai Tibetan Potent, which is surprising also.
Right.
Because we used to think that they all come from everywhere, but actually no. Singapore's redshanks all come from the same case. Kind of boring. From a conservation standpoint, it's not really too much of the problem. The entire population is very similar of grand scheme of things, and they are very high in numbers. So we can use them as a sentinel species. And second of all, we can also draw some conclusions on the validity of the subspecies designations, and it probably requires a bit more deeper reassessment by morphology to identify whether or not these subspecies limits should continue to be treated this way. Yeah. Okay. And they're not really facing imminent threat as compared to some of the other various shorebirds.
This also brings into my other question on why we have to preserve a species and how you pick and choose.
So we know biodiversity in itself means diversity in biological creatures. And this diversity is usually captured in the universal code of biology, which is the DNA. So there are some lineages that are more limited than the others. Just by virtue of them being maybe older, or just more distinct from the rest of the birds. Like for instance, all off the top of my head, the most interesting or the easiest, most accessible example would be the kakapo.
Is that a weird from New Zealand?
It's the weird ground parrot from New Zealand that can't fly. And it looks very strange.
Yeah.
So that one, we know that it's a very, very distinct lineage. It's very far removed from everything else. So what it means is the kakapo was to go extinct is that you're going to lose this lineage forever. And if you don't conserve it, then you will not be able to have it again. And as opposed to something that maybe has a lot of close relatives, from a researcher's point of view, we want to preserve the optimal as much genetic diversity as we want. So from that perspective, you will always want to prioritize the ones that are most unique.
Yes. So maybe a little bit more about the sand plover. Okay, so
The sand plovers are also another waded species, but they are different from the shanks. They are little plovers. They're kind of round and dumpy, cute and squashed. They are short, stumpy feet as opposed to the long legs of shanks and cattlers.
Yeah.
Which are the redshanks. So for plovers, they run along the mudflats and visually pick out the prey animals and they peck at them. But for redshanks, they actually probe. They go in the deep water and they probe and they look. For sand plovers, we have 3 species: the greater sand plover, the Siberian sand plover, and the Tibetan sand plover. So the Siberian and Tibetan sand plover are recently split just last year. They were in the past grouped together into this species called the lesser sand plover. The third species in this complex is the greater sand plover. Yes. So the greater sand plover is consistently larger, longer bill, everything is longer, is bigger. If you have 3 groups on a tree,
yeah.
then the Tibetan and Siberian are not side by side.
Okay.
They are not the closest. Actually, the greater is in between them. And for the longest time, we still thought that they are the same. The Tibetan sand plovers, the Tibetan group, had a black forehead. They have a black forehead. Whereas the Siberian group has a black forehead with white spots.
And it's really hard to see, right? Because you were telling me that there's like breeding plumage, non-breeding plumage.
Shorebirds are difficult because they fly in like huge flocks. And you can't interview them one by one. And when they fly, you can't chase and isolate the individual. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Excuse me, who are you? Doesn't work. And the difference between Siberian and Tibetan actually is just some measurement differences in their wintering forms. The Siberian has a shorter bill and has some different colors on the flank. That means below the wing. That's only visible when the bird stretches or it flies. And also the feet, the tarsus of the bird, you can tell apart the Siberian from the Tibetan for how far the leg protrudes from the tail in flight. So it's very possible that maybe once in a while we see Siberian sand plovers in Singapore, but we may just miss it. It's very easy to miss. In my third chapter, my dissertation, I actually did the same genomic marker study on sand plovers. Yeah, all 3 sand plovers. And we found that Singapore sand plovers all affiliate again with the Tibetan population.
Okay, so it's really like even among species, they all are coming.
Yeah, for some reason. So that's something that's interesting, something to keep in mind too. And now we know that Siberian samples are actually endangered. Oh, and I do believe that due to the misconception or misconceived notion that Tibetan and Siberian were lesser sand plovers, and the Tibetans are doing quite well. Yeah. So you have overlooked the threat. It has perpetuated the neglect of the or rather our ignorance of the threats that the Siberian sand plovers are missing. So pretty much it was going extinct in plain sight. So it shows the importance of knowing what we have. Yeah. And even though like species may look the same, even in the wintering realms, it's important to keep in mind where they come from, and what could be happening. And that's what we do as geneticists, ornithologists, but also to identify and verify whether or not species are valid and the genetic basis of such arguments, so that we can better inform conservation.